Okay. We'll eventually unmute you all. But first, I want to take a second and say thank you for joining us on relatively short notice. I'm here with Sheena Colum and some of the people on the team, but I'm in Hamilton actually in a gym because we just finished a meet and greet down here and came to do this Zoom. So I want to say thank you. It looks like we have 195 people. I'm sure that'll grow, and to talk about affordability in New Jersey. I'm going to run through really quickly kind of the background on why we're doing this in this format. And then I'm going to turn it over to Sheena to talk a little bit about kind of her experience around affordability. Then I'm going to speak a little bit about the things that I want to accomplish in detail. And then we'll just open it up to questions. And we'll do our best to kind of just go through first come, first serve in the chat. And we'll do our best to aggregate things that are similar, but we'll do our best to spend some time and answer everything in specifics. When I started this campaign 2 years ago, it was early, and people criticized me or said, "Why would you start so early? It's hard to stay relevant." And I said at the time that I wanted to really do two things that were different. I wanted to build a campaign that was grassroots oriented, which we are doing, that was outside the typical establishment. And the second part was really being substantive on policy, really talking about, here's what I will do to change New Jersey. Here's what I've done in Jersey City. Here's my experience. And here is what I know I can accomplish in 4 years. And we started rolling out one policy paper per month, and then we would do these Zoom calls, and 300, 200, 350 would sign up, and I knew I was onto something. The campaign is different because it's really substantive on results. This is what I will do, whether it's transportation or housing. Most of the other ones have, other candidates have a couple platitudes, couple sound bites. I mean, our transportation plan is 18 pages long. Our housing plan is 20 pages long, and real things that I know we can accomplish. The last piece of it was around affordability, taxes, and how we want to approach this conversation in New Jersey. And I started from this standpoint of that these same talking points for probably 20 years. We're going to need to consolidate. We're going to need to procurement reform, and a lot of empty promises that haven't been delivered, while New Jersey has become less and less affordable. And I think part of the issue is really that you need a governor that understands municipal government. In New Jersey, you have 500 plus municipalities. You have home rule. You have mayors that drive a lot of the decisions and impact. And you'd have governors for a long time that have no experience or relatively little experience with how their decisions directly impact municipal government, taxes, and affordability. Even when things are well-intentioned, they sometimes go sideways when we have to deliver a tax bill. And if you think about it, I mean, you know, our current governor, Phil Murphy, came from being the ambassador to Germany, didn't have municipal experience. 8 years before that was Chris Christie, came from being the U.S. attorney, no direct municipal experience. 4 years before that was John Corzine, a U.S. senator, no direct municipal experience. 2 years before that was Dick Cody, who was in Trenton, a state senator, no direct municipal experience. So it's been more than 20 years. And I would tell you that that connectivity is really, really important to understanding how we're going to drive down the tax issues and create a more affordable New Jersey. And so the hope of this is that I'm going to talk through a couple of issues from experience, things that I know I can push and accomplish, and then we'll just open up to questions from there. I want to start by just turning it over briefly to Sheena to introduce herself and talk about her experience with regards to taxes, affordability, and the challenges that face New Jersey. For those of you that aren't familiar, we announced yesterday that she'll be my partner, the lieutenant governor. And I think it's important for transparency to the public so people know what an administration looks like. Coming from an urban mayor, urban experience as a mayor of Jersey City, I recognize that not everybody wants to live in Jersey City, and having a suburban mayor and that experience is complementary and important. And so I'm going to turn it over briefly to Sheena to introduce herself, and then we're going to start running through some of the platform highlights, and then we'll open it up to questions. Sheena, show's yours.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. So, Steve, you didn't actually announce me yesterday. It was 2 weeks ago, but I know that the campaign is going by pretty quickly. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sheena Colum. I'm the mayor in South Orange. That's located in Essex County. As much as I'd like to believe that Steve selected me as his partner in crime for my wit and charm, it is more the complementary balance of suburban and urban, and he understands tactically why that's important. His community has 300,000 residents. It has a $750 million operating budget. My community has about 18,500 residents and has a $50 million operating budget. Overall, you can see that there's 564 towns in New Jersey, way too many layers of government, and more communities look like mine. If you think about it, 75% of all towns have 20,000 residents or less, and 55% of towns have less than 10,000 people. So there is a lot of money that's, being transacted at the local government level. I'd like to call it, duplicating, triplicating, quadruplicating services all across the board. A little bit about my experience is that over the past 10 years, to augment Steve's austerity and fiscal discipline in Jersey City, is that the budgets that I've introduced have maintained under 3% over the past 10 years. And we increased our fund balance, which is surplus, from 350,000 to 12.5 million. As everybody knows, it's really important that we have good bond ratings, that we show fiscal discipline, that we're able to save for infrastructure improvements, and that we don't oversubscribe our taxpayers in the long term. And we need to be able to afford things that make the quality of life better for our residents. Some of the things that I feel very, very strongly about, and that, I want to bring to Fulop's administration is, I ran for this office to dissolve it. I am one of those mayors that would tell you very quickly, there is no reason I need to exist. I find it unfortunate that we do what we do. Some of the things that, I've prioritized in my administration is that, we were looking at a dilapidated town hall that was very old. It was aging. I sold it. It's now a restaurant and beer garden. We moved on to a recreation facility. We moved on to improving our parks and recreation facilities. We moved on to our library. In the long term, I hope that we are merged with the neighboring community. I have one of the strongest and largest shared consolidations in the state of New Jersey, which is moving fire departments, working with partners in Maplewood and my colleagues on the village council. Fire service is something that, if you have a career fire department, it's not sustainable. We need to think regionally about that. I've been a very large advocate for stormwater management and regionalizing those services as well, because we can't continue to have micro utilities all across New Jersey. I always like to use this example because it really resonates with me, is the way that municipal government operates. And I can tell you, because I'm on the inside, is I like people to imagine, 5 people in your household, and then asking all 5 of them to get groceries for the week. And just think how wild that is. If somebody brings back items that are like, for tacos and Mexican night, somebody else has stuff for kimbap, or, something Korean oriented. Somebody brought back, like, pork roll, Taylor ham, not going to opine on which name to use. Everybody comes back with something different. You really don't actually have a full meal. And then, once all those people come back to your house and you realize, like, nobody got anything for your dog named Democracy, which is actually a true story for me. And she's wondering where her pepperoni is. Think about the inefficiency of just what transpired. You had 5 people who were driving, 5 who didn't have coordinated schedules, 5 people who might have taken off work, 5 people who didn't be able to leverage a buy one, get one. None of the coupons were utilized because you all went separately. And then you all came back and you weren't even able to put an entire meal together because everybody did something that was uncoordinated. That is your municipal government in a nutshell. And anybody who says that's not the way it operates, they're lying to you. And we do that at the municipal level, at the school level, at the county level, and certainly the state of New Jersey really, really leans in on saying that we're a home rule state. And what does that mean? Is that you're paying an inefficiency tax. Moving forward, I would love, love, love everyone to vote for Stephen, because he's made it very, very clear that he's going to prioritize what's happening at the state and the trickle effect that it has on local government. Every politician in Trenton right now tells you they have no control over property taxes because that's a you thing. That is local government, school government, county government. We have no control over your local property taxes. And I call BS on that. What happens in Trenton are unfunded mandates that come down to the municipal level on so many levels. I'll give you just an example is recycling right now. All of your towns are required to recycle. But right now we're recycling glass. There's no market in New Jersey for glass. So what are we doing? We're expending a lot of resources and money to recycle something that's unrecyclable, that's untenable. If you think about other unfunded mandates, affordable housing and development obligations is, while it is a number that goes out to municipalities of what your fair share of affordable housing units is, the legislature says that there is no infrastructure upgrades that are required by the municipality. How do you increase your population substantially, whether you're for it or against it? There has to be an acknowledgement that if you're increasing your population by 10, 15, 20%, there's going to be necessary infrastructure upgrades that are necessary for you. And you need tools and resources that come from Trenton to accommodate the growth that your community is going to be experiencing. In South Orange as well, everybody needs an animal control officer, not just for my community, but all 564 communities. Do we need 564 animal control officers, or do we need a county-wide, I would say no kill shelter, because I love dogs and cats and pets, that is contributed to by all the surrounding municipalities rather than all of us doing it by ourselves? There is serious, serious, serious money to be saved. And I think that people are willing to pay for good services, but they're not willing to pay for inefficient services or corrupt services. So I hope that gives you just a little bit of insight as to my partnership with Stephen, why I'm so glad to be running with him. I will, rightfully admit, as you've probably seen me say numerous times, I'm a policy wonk. I am a complete, I'm a nerd. It really is a passion. I started as every candidate running for governor talks about what they were doing 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I was a hall monitor. Okay. I love this work. I love finding solutions to problems. I love working with people. And my residents would tell you that I'm probably one of the most responsive mayors in New Jersey. And I'm excited to be here tonight. So I'll turn it back over to Steve. And hopefully the things that I said resonate from a small town all the way to what he's proposed with the town.
Sheena, thank you for that.
You're very welcome,
Even
Stephen.
even the hall monitor part. All right, so let's go through a little bit about kind of what's going to be different on what we're trying to do with regards to affordability in New Jersey. So I'm not going to belabor the first part of the platform, which is really, or the paper on the website, which really speaks to what have I done in Jersey City. And it speaks to some of the participatory budgeting practices that we've done. It speaks to some of the things around fiscal discipline that we've done, how we've restructured government. But I'm not going to focus on that as much. I want to talk about the things that we're going to change in New Jersey that are different than the other people. The first is that if you are going to push consolidation, which is really important, any mayor would tell you that you have 500 plus municipalities in New Jersey and you need to drive down costs from consolidation. It's a talking point. The way that you're going to actually force that to happen is by creating a little bit of leverage around municipalities. We rolled this out yesterday. I know the League of Municipality hates the fact that I'm saying it. I know a bunch of mayors have said that they don't like the fact that I'm saying it. But the reality is that how often and frequent that your municipality can go out to the bond market, to the capital markets to fund different projects without accountability from the voters creates a process that ultimately is unwieldy and increases costs. Your Board of Education doesn't have that same flexibility. I view that the opportunity around your local finance board, who controls and who approves the municipal bonding, as a leverage point over municipalities to force consolidation conversations, to force consolidation of functions, to force consolidation into county government, and to drive down costs. The reason I'm saying that to you is because it's different than the others in that I'm just not asking and saying that, hey, hopefully we could consolidate. I'm telling you that there is a tool that Trenton has, and I'm going to be open about recalibrating that power structure so that way you can actually force the consolidation of services and drive down costs. It's very, very important to changing the paradigm as it relates to affordability in New Jersey. The second thing is that I outlined there that is different is we talk a lot about this Stay New Jersey program that the governor and the legislature introduced 2 years ago. Those of you that are familiar with it, it was a proposal to cut property taxes by up to 50% for seniors. And seniors that make less than $500,000 qualify. And there are certain things that have to happen in the legislature in order for it to be funded. Part of it is funding of the pension. Part of it is fully funding the education. Part of it is a surplus, I believe it said, of 12% if you read the legislation. At the time, when it was first proposed 2 months before an election, in that Democrats thought that they were going to lose seats in the legislature. So they said, you know what, we're going to do something bold. We're going to propose this idea that we're going to cut property taxes for seniors. And at the time, Phil Murphy's first reaction was, it's unaffordable. We can't do this. And while the legislature pushed, he didn't want to be against property tax cuts, so he eventually acquiesced to it. However, the caveat was that it will go into effect the year after he leaves office. That in of itself should tell you everything you need to know about how true this program is. If it was something that would work long-term as it relates to a property tax cut of 50%, which is something that we want to deliver or want to achieve, I assure you that the governor and the legislature would have delivered it while they were in office, not after they leave office. So I think we need to think about the Stay New Jersey program. What I've outlined is that if the legislature meets those objectives, of course, she and I would never stand in the way of delivering a 50% property tax reduction, but they have to meet those objectives: fund the pension, fund the education, and a 12% surplus. Up till now, they haven't met those obligations fully. So it's doubtful whether in this current environment where you're being threatened by the federal government, that you would actually attain it. What we propose here instead is ending the labyrinth of different programs on rebates that often are not publicized, that people can't navigate, and moving more towards a circuit breaker program similar to other states that would basically cap your income at 4%. I mean, your property taxes at 4% of your income. And that's an important thing because it would help, obviously, people that are lower income or mid-level income. And it's something from a structural standpoint that would work from a budgetary standpoint. I think it's a better approach because it's cleaner, it's easier to understand, and it would help more seniors. I also outlined that if the Stay New Jersey program does ultimately come into effect, that he does meet the agenda, I do say that we're going to lower the threshold from 500,000 more towards 150 or 200,000. In order to broaden the program more towards renters as well. So there's a lot of seniors that are homeowners, but there's also a lot of seniors that are renters. And I do think that we need to be more conscious of that. A senior that's making $500,000 a year is probably less conscious of their property taxes or less in need of the help around the property taxes. So we outline that in a very plain and clear way to understand. The next thing is something that we've lived in Jersey City and I've seen firsthand, and it also speaks to the tax revaluation process. When New Jersey has a law that when you revalue your properties, that happens periodically by a municipality, it's supposed to happen every couple of years, or when the equalization ratio, that's the ratio between sales and property value, drop below a certain percentage. But it doesn't happen because it's tremendously disruptive, because the process in New Jersey squeezes seniors out that haven't really monetized their home. It says that you have an asset that's worth $1 million or $2 million, even though it's not something that you could tap into, and it resets your taxes. We would move more towards a point of sale system similar to what California, New York, and many other states have, that you would only reassess your property at the point of sale ultimately. And the reason that we do that is because seniors get squeezed out of their homes in the current system, and we need to change that. And I think that having an experience on that makes a lot of sense. We talk supply. We have a very, very comprehensive housing program here. It's the background that Sheena has as a executive director in the American Planning Association and also as a mayor, and so do I. I think that we have a very thoughtful strategy on how we're going to expand housing. Part of it is really kind of getting rid of some of the regulations that work to hinder development. Most importantly is the long-term tax abatement policy as it relates to New Jersey. Some of you probably have read the book Abundance. It's a conversation, obviously, that's happening now around abundance theory. You could think of it in that sort of context, where you have an obstacle for larger projects on long-term tax abatements that become very political. And often municipalities don't engage in them because of the fact that they're very complicated from a political standpoint to achieve them. I believe that the tax abatement policy should be a more formalized process that's approved by the DCA, that's Trenton, when an administration takes office, and should set parameters around this is the percentage of affordability, this is the percentage of years that we'll have, this is the type of census tract that we'll do. And once that program is approved by your DCA commissioner, I believe municipalities should be able to move forward because it creates more supply, which drives down housing. That one change would have a huge impact in housing growth and housing creation throughout the state of New Jersey. Finally, the one other thing I wanted to highlight is we talk a lot about recalibrating the tax brackets. It's something that I would do in the first 60 days, particularly around the higher end of the income earners in the state of New Jersey. A millionaire's tax is not a millionaire's tax from 20 years ago. It's not the same thing. And I think that it's something I would do in the first 60 days because I recognize as a mayor, the political capital that I have in the first 60 or 90 days are not the same that I would have in the next 3 years. And I think that it's important to kind of reassess those from a revenue standpoint. And then finally, you do pay a corruption tax in the state of New Jersey. It's a unique tax that we pay in New Jersey only. The structure of government speaks to this, and our campaign is about reforming that. I mean, if you take a step back and you think about it practically, a lot of the things that drive costs in New Jersey, from PSE&G to Horizon, that have monopolies, part of the reason that they are where they are is because you have party chair people that act as lobbyists that actually work for these people, those companies, and input who those elected officials are at the same time. That whole system needs to be recalibrated and changed. And we are in this unique position within this gubernatorial election with primary challenges, with creating transparency around the lieutenant governor, your attorney general, that we're looking to change the system. So those are at the high level. Those 6 things are things that I think and I know that I can do, along with Sheena, driving down costs because they're real substantive change to force consolidation. And with that, I think we could just open up to questions and comments and go from there and see where the conversation goes. I did notice that some people had questions around transportation, around some of the other issues that are on our website. We've had similar Zoom calls on those. If we have time, I'll answer them. Lisa, if you want to touch on them, but we could try to focus a little bit more on affordability and taxes.
Yeah, so we're going to start with Andy Weiss, who has a question about New Jersey Transit consolidation.
Yes. Yes.
And Andy, I'm going to unmute you. All right, while we wait for Andy.
Oh, you can hear me now, right? Sorry about
go
that.
ahead. There you go.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, just a quick question about NJ Transit. Well, basically, my last question, I'll just be real quick. About the NJ Transit Police, like I've noticed for a long time that we have 2 statewide police agencies, the state police and the NJ Transit Police. I think it's redundant and wasteful. So I think that's a place where, that some fiscal reform can take place. Thank you, Mayor.
I appreciate the comment. I don't think I could speak to that yet as far as the efficiencies and the overlap there specifically on that, but I made the note of the comment as a potential. I guess, interest of time, Lisa, we'll keep going.
Absolutely. Fred Cook, you've had a bunch of questions. I'll ask you to ask one. Fred, can you unmute yourself?
Am I on yet?
You are. Go ahead, Fred.
Hi, everybody. I think you answered the shared services one somewhat. I'm more interested in the mansion tax and how that structurally does a couple of things. First of all, it does raise funds for people spending higher amounts of money, but it also seems to stabilize pricing. And to me, if the mansion tax was lowered at a very small amount to say 250,000 at 0.5% and goes up 0.5% every $250,000 from there, it'd be a way of getting people to not sell houses for 650 when they're only worth 500. And there'd be a way of helping to stabilize the way pricing happens within the state. I don't know if that's price fixing, but to me, it just seems like it'd be a good way to raise funds and at the same time sort of really control pricing on how much housing sells for.
Yeah, Fred, I differ a little bit with some of the other candidates around the mansion tax in particular. And I'm going to tell you why. There's proposals to increase the mansion tax from 1% on $1 million home to 3%. And that equates to $20,000 coming out of the seller's pocket. And the issue is that in New Jersey today, because the lack of supply on housing and high demand, prices have gone up, that you have people that have been in their homes for a long, long time, that their retirement is based on selling that home. And $1 million home doesn't necessarily reflect today somebody that is super wealthy, unfortunately. That's a whole nother issue about creating more supply. So what we did on the mansion tax is that we implemented the mansion tax more on the houses that are 2.5, 3 million, and 5 million, because those are significantly larger homes, and obviously gradually lifting it from there. But we've been reluctant to do it for lower priced homes or average priced homes, just because the cost of New Jersey of homes. And I know the political thing to say is, yeah, we're just going to raise the mansion tax. But if you're fair about the fact that $1 million home in some of these municipalities doesn't necessarily reflect somebody that has a tremendous amount of money, you got to think about the fact that $20,000
We lost you.
to that person is a huge amount of money.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess
Do you still got me?
I still got you.
No?
I guess, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you, Fred.
I guess I was more thinking about the $875,000 condos that are selling in two-family homes in Jersey City, where
Yep.
those numbers are just unrealistic. And if there was a tax that sort of addressed that number, maybe that number could come down to 750 or something like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the solution to a lot of this stuff is housing supply. I think that you need a regional plan, and Sheena,
And a lot of housing.
I think it really is about housing supply conversation and having a regional plan. It doesn't matter how much Jersey City builds in isolation, or Hoboken or Newark. If you're not talking about a solution that really is region wide, you're going to have a problem as relates to demand and supply.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's
Thank
just
you.
go to the next question. Thanks, Fred.
Steve and Sheena, we're getting a lot of questions that I could probably consolidate. They want a little bit more clarification on consolidation and what that would mean and what that would look like.
So let me just say from experience, let me start on the capital conversation creates leverage for Trenton to really talk about consolidation. The conversations up till now from Trenton have been really kind of using a carrot to entice people to want to consolidate services. And it's had very, very limited results over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I'm also conscious of the fact that if somebody lives in Metuchen, they want to live in Metuchen, even though a reasonable person would say Metuchen is the donut hole in Edison, right? But they would say that, okay, they want to live in Metuchen, so we need to be conscious of just absorbing municipalities and municipalities disappearing, because that's not the right approach. What I think that the best thing that we can do is thinking about how to force the consolidation conversation on shared services, particularly moving them in certain places towards a county function and reducing cost at your municipal level. That is the best way to kind of force consolidation in a way that isn't an affront to residents. Example, I'm a believer in health departments could be more functioning at a county level. Municipalities shouldn't generally have their own health departments through and through, that you can move that up to a county level. Animal control, same sort of situation. Talking about fire departments, Sheena has experience on this. I'll turn it over to her as well. You need to have consolidation where appropriate from a regional standpoint. Those are things that I think that you could drive at to lower cost with the leverage that we talked about, without eliminating a municipality in title, which is really important, because like I said, somebody who lives in Metuchen wants to live in Metuchen, and we need to be sensitive to that.
And I'll add on to that, when you think about consolidations and mergers, it doesn't necessarily have to be entire towns. When you could focus on your largest services, which is from the school district side, you're not wanting to eliminate teachers, but you have redundancy in administration, nonstop in administration. When you look on the municipal side, just think about this. When the legislature passes a bill, and we need to interpret a bill, typically it's an attorney. Attorneys can charge anywhere between $250 to $1,000 an hour. They're all interpreting the same bill to tell 564 towns what this new bill means. Animal control services that I was talking about here in South Orange, again, communities look more like mine. we were averaging between 6 and 12 dogs a year. Are we going to build our own no-kill animal shelter and have an animal control officer whose FTE is over $100,000 a year for 6 to 12 dogs? It makes no sense. With our fire department merger, which was the worst election I've ever been in, is because, you know, we had very strong unions who went door to door against me. Everything that was claimed did not come to fruition in the least bit. And I don't think 2 is enough. I think we need 21, which is the number of counties, or 22, which is the number of towns that we have in Essex County. For us, if you think about strategically where your home is located, it may be closer to a firehouse in another town than it is to the firehouse in your own community. Think about the duplication of the highest paid public employees in the state. Police chiefs, fire chiefs, administrators. You can be talking about full-time equivalents of 300,000 plus a year when it's fully loaded with benefits, when in reality, if you have any type of structure where you only have one person supervising one person who's supervising one person, you have inefficiency. So a lot of those administrative roles can absolutely be coordinated together so you don't have 564 towns, each I call it duplicating, triplicating, quadruplicating services that are already being done over the border. If you look from a land use perspective, the number of land use boards that you have in New Jersey, you can literally straddle a border and there will be hundreds of different definitions for what a front yard setback is. That's how making business tough to deal with, is that you have different codes for towns that are literally right next to each other, where it's like, you can have a sign this big, you can't have a sign that big. Is that what it turns into is cost to taxpayers. It's by design. And I always joke, the reason that I exist is because, you know, most people want to have a nice little badge that says mayor. They like being called honorable, which is not a given. It's something that is earned. And nobody wants to give up power. Like, I wouldn't want to give up power, but sometimes if you love something, you got to let it go. And for taxpayers, I hope more elected officials than less will step up to the plate and say, I know we're being very inefficient and we can do a lot better.
Yeah, and I just want to add, because I saw some of the questions, the goal is not to get rid of municipalities. I mean, I'm very conscious of the fact, like I said earlier, that people choose a place to live and they're sensitive to that. But I think there's a lot of those services that we could force the conversation on that just make sense, that you wouldn't find offensive. And the reason that Sheena and I are able to speak to it, again, because I think being a mayor is an experience around this with successes and failures specific to this sort of conversation. I could speak a lot about consolidation that we've done well in Jersey City, and I could speak to examples where we've tried and we failed, and you learn through that process on what works and what doesn't work. You want to go to the next question, Lisa?
Yes, we have Marianne Rampula. I'll get you Marianne Clementi, I promise.
Hi. Yeah, Steve, so I appreciate you taking a look at the different programs that, you know, are working on affordability for seniors, but we have an awful lot of working poor in this state that,
Yep.
you know, are non-seniors. They might not have young kids, so they don't qualify for a lot of those types of programs, and they're really kind of stuck in the middle and really struggling. So do you have any thoughts about how we could make New Jersey more affordable for them?
For middle income people, lower income people you're talking about?
Yeah, you know, that might be not eligible because they're not seniors yet, but they're working. And, you know, a lot of the programs seem to be targeted either at seniors or at very
Yeah.
poor people. And
Yeah.
we know people are struggling in the middle.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, and I'm going to defer to Sheena on the housing conversation. She talks a lot about the middle market housing, that we also talk about workforce housing, how to develop that. Go back to the fact around your housing for affordability for regular people is an issue because of the supply conversation. That's really ultimately what the issue is around that. With regards to jobs and employment and opportunities around that, I think I mean, it's a lot in our education plan, but it's around job skills training and the things that we're doing in order to encourage better paying jobs and better skills here. But on the housing supply, because I think that's important, Sheena, I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so as Steve mentioned, I'm the executive director of the American Planning Association in New Jersey. And so housing supply and demand is something that we are always pushing for, especially even just the discussion about accessory dwelling units. just as large as the issue with working poor. And if you're not familiar with it, is that the affordable housing lottery, in which case right now I have 15,000 people on a waiting list for my community that has 18,500 people, is that it's based on area median income and a percentage of where you are as with respect to that. So it's set by the federal government. You will have income limits for very low and moderate income households. Where I feel that we have even just as big of a challenge is the missing middle. How many times have you seen a house go on the market, a nice home, for 300 to 500,000? That's almost non-existent. I think we need to use our housing laws through the legislature to create opportunities for set-asides and new developments, the same way that we do for very low and moderate income households, to be able to capture missing middle and put incentives in place for home ownership opportunities in that regard as well, because everything in the market right now tilts towards rentals. We're seeing the rental I mean, it has boomed. Yeah, every developer. The one thing that I will say though is most people always say, oh, all these luxury developments. There's not a developer in the state that doesn't believe that their development is luxury. 90% of them are actually just market rate for the location in which the demand is high. And so the missing middle is something that's really important to me, because that's where we get into aging in place. And this is something that is being pushed very, very hard by AARP, is for people who are downsizing from, a much larger home and wanting to remain in their community and needs an option. And they're not a part of the working poor, but they can't afford a house that is $500,000 plus. So that is going to be strategically really important for the Department of Community Affairs, as well as the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency.
Great, thanks. We are going to move on to Marianne Hayden. Marianne, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just typed in a few questions. I said, please talk about the point of sales tax for property taxes. Because, as it is now, it's really like we're being taxed on unrealized gains.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
exactly
particularly for long-term residents.
Yeah, so it's exactly right. I mean, the law today is that when a municipality does a revow, you need to reassess the entire municipality simultaneously. So if somebody lived there for a year and bought a place for $1 million versus somebody that's been there for 40 years and they purchased their place back then for $100,000, they could both get reassessed the same. And the person that might be on fixed income that bought it for $100,000 gets reassessed up to that new property value, and it makes it very hard for people to stay in their homes. That's the ultimate disconnect there. What that leads to is a lot of municipalities that haven't done a revow in a very long period of time, because they continue to punt it because they think that it's very disruptive politically and governmentally to do the revow. So the whole system is disconnected there. And you know that if you're a mayor, because you've lived it. We went through a revow. I was reluctant to do it because it ultimately ended up squeezing people out, exactly what we've outlined. And I said from that point that if I ever got the opportunity to be the governor, I would change the system to more of a point of sale at the time of the person selling is when you would reassess the property. So that way, when you actually do realize the gains and the buyer comes in knowing what that new tax rate will be, there's transparency on both sides. That's more fair, and you're not squeezing anybody out. And I think it's just a better system overall. Other states do it. New Jersey does not do that, but I think it's imperative to keep people in their homes.
Great, thanks. Maureen Parrott has a question that ties in with something Satanik asked, but I think Maureen can ask for both of them.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to ask about, I read on page 11 about requiring a referendum
Yeah.
for municipal bonds. I actually just did a petition for referendum on a municipal bond in my municipality. And I think when I read that, I was just amazed. So I'd like to explain, how would that work?
Yeah. The objective there is to create more controls for the voters over the municipal government. That's really ultimately the objective there. More accountability, similar to what you have at a board of education. I said this earlier, that a lot of mayors don't like that I included this in there. But ultimately, the goal is that if the mayor proposes a plan that they cannot articulate to the public and it goes towards a referendum and it fails, okay, it'll force a more comprehensive conversation with Trenton around how does consolidation happen. And so the referendum tool and the accountability to the public is really the tool to get to consolidation of services and to drive down costs. And the reason that we put this in there is because I wanted to be clear with the public on how we're going to get there ultimately, how we are going to achieve driving down the cost and a more comprehensive consolidation conversation. The referendum, with you as a resident, as my partner, ultimately holding people accountable, ultimately will drive that conversation.
Great. Mary Ann, go ahead.
Me, Mary Ann?
You, Mary
Yes.
Ann, the one and only.
You know how I feel about consolidation. I've been talking about it since 2005 with Corzine. Why can't I'm from New York. We governed at the county level. For example, Nassau County, leave New York City out of the picture, but all of the other counties like Nassau, Suffolk County, every town still had their identity. They still had their name. It wasn't, taken away. And the everything was consolidated. The police had like a satellite police stations in all of the towns. Are we going to get to that point? Because that, if people understand, they need to understand in English and in language that they can understand that this home rule stuff costs a lot of money. And if it's an oxymoron to say, I want to reduce my taxes, but I want home rule. You can't have the two together.
True. It's true. So I think, Marianne, both Sheena and I are both very committed to this consolidation conversation. The reason that we have outlined it in the way that we have is different because we're showing you the tool we are going to use to force that conversation. I know that we're right about it because a lot of people that like the system the way it is today called both Sheena and I and said, we don't like the fact that you're proposing this, which tells you that they recognize what it will lead to, which ultimately is a good thing from the affordability conversation. Every single candidate talks about consolidation and too much government. There isn't another candidate that says, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And I know some people won't like it, but it will ultimately benefit the state because we're going to drive down costs. Do I think that you could have county police forces everywhere? It's probably a long road to get to something like that, to be perfectly honest with you. Our goal in those 4 years is to change the paradigm around consolidation in New Jersey in a substantial way and just drive down costs. And we're going to be aggressive about it. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, Sheena and I both have a lot of scars from engaging in some tough fights, and consolidation has been something that Sheena touched on earlier. She has led some of the most difficult consolidation conversations and achievements in the state of New Jersey, merging fire departments as she did, and then having the fire union come after her in an election and her winning speaks a lot about how committed she is and I am towards this conversation. So I agree with everything you said, and we're going to be driving at that.
Marian, I will tell you, and I think this was also in the group chat, is like, does the state of New Jersey provide technical resources? They do. Governor Murphy appointed 2 shared service czars, and I happen to actually be pretty good fans of them. But I think the administration has undercut real significant consolidations and discussions about what the largest cost items are. Everybody gets excited when you talk about things like, oh, can you share a finance office? Can you share, things that are low budget items within the municipal budget or in the school district? People can get behind it. When you look at the biggest drivers of what needs to be shared or consolidated to achieve real tax savings, you're going to have special interest groups who are going to come very, very hard for you. And the political reality of it, talking about how more towns resemble mine than they do Stevens, is that, you know, when somebody puts $50,000 into an election to try and stop an efficiency that you're trying to achieve, it makes a big difference. Most, I would say in the experience that I had, and you can Google search it, ooh, it was bad, if it wasn't for the residents of my community being so thoughtful and really diving into the topic, is that I would have been done. And in South Orange, we don't have a line. I don't do the whole county boss, political bosses. I've never had to kiss any rings. Is that you can get pushed out of an office that you really care about if you pick an issue where there's a special interest group that's prepared to spend a lot of money and work very hard to get you out of office.
Thank you. Our next question is from Karen Brady. Hold on, Karen, I'm gonna unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. My name's Karen. I live in Weehawken. Have a question about the Medicaid cuts at the federal level, which I understand will cost New Jersey $1 billion per year. How will we fight those, and how will we address those if they pass? How could we possibly maintain that level of care for underserved individuals? And that money will cost all of us.
Yeah, Karen, I'm gonna touch on that, even though it's not directly related to kind of the conversation we're having today. It's kind of tangentially, but I think it's important because it's another differentiator with our campaign and what we're saying versus the others. Everybody's going to talk about and says the sound bites. You've all seen it. We're going to fight Trump and we're going to fight the federal government, and it rings hollow without substantive policies behind it. So I think that what Sheena and I have tried to do is say, here are the actionable steps we'll take as governor and lieutenant governor that are different for protecting our residents. Okay. The first one is that, you know, historically, when the governor appoints appoints an attorney general in New Jersey, it's usually a political appointment, and it's somebody that they have a close relationship with. We've been clear that we will give Matt Plotkin the opportunity to stay because he's been at the forefront of litigation against the federal government and President Trump, protecting things that are important to us. And in this moment in time, continuity from a litigation standpoint is really important to protect us here in New Jersey. And so it's a differentiator really out of the gate. The second thing is that we talk about the state surplus. Phil Murphy has done a good job of building the state surplus when he took office. After all the downgrades from Chris Christie, it was at $500 million. It's grown to $6 billion. That's something to be commended. But the reality is that we talk about that during this moment in time, we would draw down on some of that state surplus to offset the losses or cuts coming from the federal government to our most vulnerable communities. I don't think anybody on this call goes to bed at night being thankful to God that we have a credit rating of XYZ for the state of New Jersey, but you do think about your Social Security, and you do think about your Medicaid and your Medicare, and for some people that's life and death, and we would prioritize that even at the cost of a temporary hit to our credit rating, making it more difficult to borrow. I think that the weighing the pros and the cons in this environment is really important to do. And then the third thing that is different about Sheena and I is that we are more vocal about the governor and lieutenant governor being the first line of defense against what the actions are from President Trump and our federal government. You know, I think it's a mistake that we don't hold our Trenton legislature or a Democratic state Senate, a Democratic assembly, and a Democratic governor more accountable for the Immigrant Trust Act, for transgender care, for women's reproductive rights. I mean, I think that the public deserves a vote that they can actually see on those things. And the fact that our Trenton legislature and our governor is not willing to put those things up says a lot. I think Sheena and I, again, both have a lot of scars from a lot of fights, and we'll be very, very vocal for these sort of things. So I think those are three things in this current environment with the federal government that are different about how we're approaching it. And particularly per your question, the surplus is what we'd leverage in a different way than other people.
And just to add on that, Steve, and because Susan wrote, I heard last night that Medicaid funding is about a third of the state funding, is we're talking about a $58 billion budget. 27 billion flows through the state, whether it's directly to the state or direct money to municipalities and counties. Of that 27 billion, about 13 billion is related to Medicaid. So you'll hear a lot of candidates talk about like, oh, we're going to lower your property taxes, or we're going to do, we're going to be fighting, mitigating the Trump era is going to be really important. That's very sizable money to maintain services, especially to our most vulnerable residents. So when you're telling me that you're cutting, I got a text message today, so-and-so is going to cut property taxes by 15%. It's like, really? That's bullshit. I don't even know how you get to that number when we are dealing in a crisis right now. Communities like mine and many across New Jersey just saw a cut to health-related grants that were flowing through from the federal government. For our community, again, a $50 million budget, $150,000 cut that came out a week and a half ago is 0.4 of a tax percentage point. That's real money that we're going to have to levy or cut services for. So, you know, how Stephen would be running for governor this time last year, is very different from the new reality of how we keep the federal funds flowing and why it's important. And I'll be the first one to say it. Why would we elect two successful people in Congress who are going to, who promised us they were going to fight Donald Trump, to shift it around, put those seats in jeopardy to run for governor when you already have effective governors in this race, or candidates for governor, where we can be firing on both cylinders? Because those two things are critical right now, is strong representatives working in the federal space and strong representatives who are working in the state space. And so just in this election in general, I feel that it's a mistake.
Okay. Lisa, you want to do another question, or we're good more or less?
I think we got lots of comments,
Okay.
lots of housing questions.
Okay. So let me just say this really quickly on the housing stuff, that we have a very, very detailed housing plan for the state of New Jersey. I would urge you to spend a little time on our website. You would see that it's more detailed than anybody else. And both Sheena and I are very, very responsive on our emails. If you go to stephenfulop.com and you fill out that form there, I will respond to you with certainty, and we will get you an answer on that, because it is important to us when you do engage. And I would just highlight that everything that we've outlined in all of our policy positions are things that I know that we can accomplish without help from the federal government. We were very, very mindful of the fact that we're in a unique time, that you need to be fighting against the federal government, but also moving the state forward, not with platitudes, but with concrete steps on how we're going to do that. And that's something that we've really driven at and be mindful of. So spend some time on the housing front, and then feel free to reach out to us if that's your specific question. Otherwise, if there's other issues, you could always get us at stephenfulop.com. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for taking some time out here on a busy night to listen to a little bit about the things that we want to do to change New Jersey. So thank you.
Steve, wait. Don't hang up yet. He always does this at the end of every single speech. He's like, thank you. Go visit our website. He forgets the most important thing, and I guess that's why I'm here. Please vote for Stephen Fulop on June 10th. He is the best choice. There is no comparison. StephenFulop.com. Get your lawn sign. Make sure they're legally placed on private property. If you can donate, great. If you can't, there's volunteer opportunities. You'll go through a training, come hang out with us. I'll canvas with you. There's a lot going on right now. We have 233 people, and it was at 270 at one point. If everybody here,
290 at one point. Yeah.
we will get him elected. So he didn't say it, I'll say it. Vote for Stephen Fulop for governor, and please sign up on the website. Would love to work with all of you and get out there, because the final 6 weeks is going to be the push of a lifetime.
Thanks, Sheena. Take care. Have a good night.
Everyone.
Good, everybody.